I am aware that this is being recorded on the cloud, even though we have not officially started. I learned this last week when I just saw myself staring blankly at the screen and brushing my hair. So this time I will try not to do anything too silly as I am waiting for the audience to gather, if in fact there even is an audience for today. I'm also in a different room. This is the Beit Midrash room over here. I'm sorry about the light situation. Not quite sure why that happens like that, but it's too bad as there are too many people in the other room. So hopefully this is going to work. Hopefully somebody's going to show up. And if not, I will enjoy having a little bit of time. Oh, here is Mr. Goodman, all the way from the UK. What's going on, Robert? Oh, hold on. Are you not muted? Can I unmute you or?
No, I'm here.
Oh, you're there. What's going on, Robert? You can see you got a lot of notes over there.
Yeah, that and that. I've been keeping really busy.
That's excellent. You got my salutations from your partner in crime, Isaac? It's been a while. It was like a week ago or so, so maybe 2 weeks even. I don't even know. All time is kind of
yeah, it's
become irrelevant at this point. And here is your other partner in crime, Max Schechter, who you no doubt had a chance to harass this year as a Shana Bet guy. What's going on, Max?
Thank God. Good. Can't complain.
Can't complain?
Huh?
What reality are you living in, man? What do you mean you can't complain?
It could be worse. That's all I'm going to say.
All right. Fair enough. Biana, we're in week 2 here. This is all you. So thank you so much.
I can't take the credit. You're doing the class.
Yeah, well, but you pushed me. Had you not, probably wouldn't have happened. So.
Well, I'm very happy.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, just going to see who else is here. Oh, Daniel Abramson. What's going on, buddy?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Thank God. I'm doing good. It's so good to see you.
You as well. I was talking to Mitch the other day, and we were talking about how you did this last time, so I figured I had to come on today.
That's great, man. It's a pleasure to see you, and I greatly enjoyed harassing, of course, you know. I'm sorry, Dan, but he's much more, you know, easy to harass than you are.
Yeah. He said he's coming on today, so I mean, you have that opportunity again. Yeah.
Hopefully. It is 10:30 in like California, you know, so he might still be asleep, but I didn't put that, you know, in when I was thinking about the time difference, but it's all good. It's all good.
For sure.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I figure we're going to chat for a couple of minutes and then I'm going to start. I always like to give people like a 5-minute grace period for being late, as usually people are late and there are some technical difficulties. Although those of you that were in the leadership class know that I've lectured many times on the importance of timeliness.
That was the first class.
That all went out the window when I moved to Israel and realized that, you know, most people in Israel have no concept of timeliness. And I would just end up being on time or early, waiting there like an idiot. So I have relaxed my draconian expectations of people being on time since then. But I try still, but you know, that's what happens. Okay. Hey, Melanie Rice. How you doing, Melanie?
Good. How are you?
Thank God. It's so great to see you.
Yeah, it's exciting to be able to.
It's awesome. You know what? If coronavirus happened in the world just so that I could see your glowing countenance and get to say hello for it, like it's worth it to me. It probably would have been easier to just pick up and call you, but you know, that's how life is.
Such is life, for sure. I'm excited for today.
Excellent. Well, I will confess that last week I prepared for like 3 hours, and I realized that that was probably a big mistake because I don't know, it wasn't the same as just doing stuff off the cuff. For those that don't know, Melanie and Biana were in Hebrew high school at BCHSJS many years ago, and I got to torment them in a classroom setting for a period of over 3 years, and then on Shabbatons and other things. So those of you that were at Leva Torah for like a year or two, you guys got nothing on these ladies.
I miss those days so much.
Yeah.
Simchas Torah in your house?
We had some
I miss it so
crazy
much.
times. Yes. Well, when you guys
Legendary.
all realize that there's no future in America, which I think that's becoming clearer and clearer as time goes on, for any number of reasons without even getting political. So, we'll all be back here in Israel,
Yeah.
and then we'll take it from there.
Just, can I just say one thing? Surprisingly, my dad is very supportive of me making Aliyah,
Nice.
which is really interesting.
That was a recent change?
No, but a couple weeks ago, my parents are nearing retirement age, and my mom, she wants to retire in Europe, and my dad's like, why don't we just retire in Israel? And I'm like, well, that's great, because if I raise my family there, they'll be close by. I mean, it's like.
That's great. You're like the second or third person that's come out with one of these like shocking statements in the last few weeks, but
yeah,
it's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy.
I mean, it won't be for a few years because I gotta pay off my debts and get some financial stability, and hopefully.
Depending on who takes over the White House, your debts may be annulled or paid back, or it could be that money as we know it, aka dollars, will be worthless since we're just printing them like there's no tomorrow. So
yeah, well, my loans are refinanced, so they're private loans now, so they won't be forgiven.
Well, I bless you that something will happen that will work it out, and
yeah.
Nice.
Well,
all right, we are at the 8:36 time counter, so I'm just going to start. So first of all, again, I want to thank everyone for making time to sit and learn together. Next week in America, it's July 5th, which is after July 4th. Does that change scheduling for anybody? I know Robert will be, in the UK, will be definitely mindful of that date. But he's still
thrilled, I say.
You're still beat up about it, I know, but still, should we try to have class? Should I have a poll? Should I just have class, even if like one person? Are you guys gonna be like hungover from the day before? You're hungover now, so it doesn't matter. You got plans? All right. So you know what? We're just gonna play it by ear, and we'll figure it out, and it's all good. All right, so in any event, I could just record the class, even if it's just me speaking to myself, and post it on Facebook, and then, we can take it from there. All right, so I realize, as I shared with you, ladies and gentlemen, that last week, preparing for 3 hours may have been a little bit over the line, and perhaps I should reel it back a little bit. And meanwhile, imagine like it's almost of a different group from last week. You guys are the ones that would want like a 3-hour prep class, but whatever. I'll try to make it interesting and amusing at the same time. So for those of you that are living outside of Israel, which is for the purposes of this phone call, all of you, you are going to be reading Parshat Chukat this Shabbat, if your synagogue is meeting. If your synagogue is not meeting, thank you. It's probably, just to know that everybody should be reading Parshat Chukat. I'm not going to talk about everything that happened in the Parsha. I'm just going to use the Parsha as a launch point to discuss, different ideas. Having said that, last week was the Yortzeit. It was the anniversary of passing of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rav Menachem Mendel Schneerson Zatzal, who easily can be said to be one of the most, if not the most influential rabbi of the 20th century. I had the great zechut, the great merit of meeting him maybe 8-9 times. I posted a picture on Facebook, which has like, I don't know, several hundred likes, with me and my long hair when I was 19, with the Rebbe. And definitely Chabad was instrumental in me being observant today. After I left yeshiva, day school education for 12 years, I was like, I'm out of here. And really it was the shluchim, the emissaries of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, that kind of brought me back to observance or Jewish practice or whatever. So I am eternally thankful for that. In any event, though, at the time, and I can say this because you're all much, much younger than me, Back in 92, 93, there was a lot of talk about the Rebbe being Mashiach. I know that, you know, it's like kind of a joke now that people talk about the Rebbe being Mashiach, but, you know, back then the Rebbe was still strong, and there were a lot of things that took place that, you know, there was a lot of, hey, Emily, there was a lot of, there's a lot of energy, and there were a lot of things happening in the world. In any event, when the Rebbe passed away, it was pretty devastating, you know, for all of us, but particularly for people that thought he was Mashiach. The Rebbe interestingly instituted that every person, if they can, should learn the Chumash, should learn the weekly portion with Rashi. And the day that the Rebbe died was also in the Chumash, this week's Parsha, when Miriam, who is Moshe Rabbeinu's big sister, so passed away. So Rashi quotes a piece of Talmud, I believe, saying that what's the connection between the Para Aduma and the Para Aduma was the red cow that was burned, and its ashes were sprinkled on people to purify them, and it acted as an atonement. So the question is, what's the connection between the Para Aduma and the death of Miriam? So Rashi says something absolutely stunning, which is that when a righteous person passes away, it also makes an atonement for the world. I'm going to ask you guys to mute yourselves. I'm very sorry. I don't know. I pretty much figured out how to do this, but I'm not like as tech savvy as I should be. But I know that there's a way that I can mute you. I think that's kind of insulting, but all right, whatever. So the Rashi says basically, yeah, it does sound very, you could say that in front of everyone, Max. So that sounds like a kind of other religion, someone kind of dying, you know, for our sins, or someone's death atoning for our sins. So the truth of the matter is that this concept is found in the Talmud, and it's found in a few different places way before Christianity even exists. And it is codified in the Ramchal's Derech Hashem. Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, the famous author and mystic who lived in Italy and then in Amsterdam and then finally in Israel, he writes straight out in Derech Hashem that there are certain people in the world that can suffer and absolve other people from suffering. And since we're talking about Lubavitch, there's a famous Lubavitch story about the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, that one time he broke his arm and he was in excruciating pain, and he was very, very happy about it. And so the Hasidim asked, you know, like, why are you so happy about breaking your arm? And he said that there was a gezerah, there was a decree that a certain city of Jews would be annihilated, and he prayed very much that he should be able to bear whatever suffering they would take. And he broke his arm, and that ended up saving them. Now, again, I don't know the veracity of the story. I don't know what goes on in the spiritual world, so on and so forth, but we do find sources that speak about this, and they're not only Hasidic sources, there are other sources. Rabbi Dr. Twersky goes as far as to say that when, let's say, God forbid, you have a friend that loses somebody, or you lose a family member, God forbid, and you really feel bad for them, you have the ability to even take away some of their suffering by you suffering, by you feeling bad for them. So he writes that, and you know, we do find the idea in a couple of different places. I happen to think it's an empowering idea. If I'm able to take away someone else's suffering and do something obviously practically for them, it's great. But in any event, so the Rebbe's Yortzeit was last week. And I wanted to bring up this book. I'm not going to send out the weird PDFs. I did that last time. It was just kind of weird. So I'll just hold up the book, and then you can write it down. So this is the Rebbe by Rabbi Tolushkin. I think it's an awesome read. It talks about a lot of things that I never knew about, like the Rebbe's actual university education. It's a really readable book. In other words, it goes and you don't want to put it down. and I would very strongly suggest it. Rabbi Tlushkin was not a Lubavitcher Chassid, but he was close to Chabad. It does have a number of the controversies mentioned there, but I think it's an excellent read. I'll go as far as to say that I'll give you your money back if you read it and you don't like it. I know I say that all the time, but there, you know, that's it. And there you have the Amazon link. We should get like a percentage from that. No, Diana? All right. So in any event, let's go onwards. So what happens after that is this very, very bizarre story with, hey, Charles, this very, very, Charles, I'm glad that you chimed in before I went into the medical stuff and doctor stuff so that you can correct me when I say something inevitably which is false. So in any event, we have this really crazy story that Moshe, like, he hits the rock and he doesn't speak to the rock, and all of a sudden it's like, game over, man, you're not going into Israel. And most people are like, this is kind of a trivial error, you know, like, why does Moshe Rabbeinu not go into Israel just because, you know, he hit the rock? So I heard, since we're talking about Chabad, I heard from Rabbi Konikoff, who was a Chabad Chassid who taught me my bar mitzvah lessons many, many years ago. He said that actually this was a great benefit to the Jewish people, because we know that that generation ended up dying in the desert. They did not go out into Eretz Yisrael, into the land of Israel. So there's a concept that Moshe Rabbeinu was the leader of that generation, and he didn't want to leave his people. You know, his people were his people, regardless of what they did, regardless of how much they aggravated him, and we certainly know they aggravated him tremendously. But the idea is that when Tchiyat HaMetim would take place, the resurrection of the dead, that Moshe would be able to bring all of these people into the world to come as one unit. Otherwise, there are those that say in the Talmud that perhaps they did not have a place in the world to come. In other words, they saw all these miracles and they constantly tested God. So Moshe Rabbeinu would stand with them, and in his merit, they would all be granted admittance to the world to come. Now, by the way, I just want to mention a very interesting thing about, you know, sticking with the team. The Piaseczner Rebbe is a very, very famous Hasidic Rebbe who perished in the Holocaust. He was known as the Rebbe of the Warsaw Ghetto. And he was interned in a camp with a group of secular Jewish intellectuals, university professors and the like, people who he no doubt had many differences of opinion with. And he was actually offered many times to, oh, it's Aaron. Sorry, I called you Emily. He was offered many times to, you're one unit, you know, it's Ishtok Gufo, right, Aaron? So he was offered many times to escape, and his Hasidim would have gotten him out. And he's like, you think I'm going to just bail on all these people? Like, he was connected with them, and he didn't want to use his authority to get out of there and abandon this group of people. Now, one could have many different ethical discussions about what to do in such a case. Does a person have the obligation to save themselves? I am not wise enough to give an opinion on that, but it's certainly an interesting area to discuss. So in any event, the other idea could be, and this is something that anyone who has teenage children, I see a number of people that have children, they're not teenagers yet, will know that they are teenagers when you have more white hair that miraculously just pops up everywhere. My daughter Ora just turned 13 yesterday. I have successfully survived 2 teenagers, but I think Ora may be the one who really, you know, drives me in, as she is like 13 going on at least 17 right now. So we shall see. But in any event, and also she has the, my father, Alav Shalom, the Allen gregarious gene, which means that she becomes friends with like everybody everywhere she goes. You know, which obviously for a 13-year-old girl can, you know, can be something to be concerned about, but it's all good. I see Max very much smiling over there. Max, we're not going to talk about you and the ladies, dude. We already had a couple of those encounters on the street in Ein Gedi, so let's not go there. In any event, so it could be that Moshe was meant to follow a direct set of directions, of instructions, okay? Now, for those that are doing the Daf Yomi, there is this kind of discussion that goes on about like when somebody gives you a task, do you do exactly what they tell you to do, or are you allowed to enhance on the plan? Are you allowed to do a little bit more? So, this is a good discussion because, on the one hand, like when it comes to certain things, and this is the first medical statement I'll make, and Charles and Aaron, we have many medical professionals on the line now will correct me. When it comes to like certain medical procedures, you got to stick by the book. You can't kind of like, freelance and, oh, I'm just going to exchange this for that. Directions are very important to stick to. And one could certainly make the same kind of statement when it comes to, let's say technology.
We can't hear you, Eli. You're muted.
But obviously, there is something to be said for following exact instructions and directions. When it comes to making medications, when it comes to putting together a chemical compound. I promised that I'd say something about aromatherapy and essential oils because I didn't say anything last week. So when you make an essential oil blend, so just like one drop too much of anything can ruin the blend and destroy the whole thing. So it could be that the lesson is that when somebody gives you instructions, just follow the instructions, do exactly what they told you to do, and don't try to elaborate and don't try to get smart and don't try to, to embellish it. Just do what it is, because even in the best intentions, you could ruin everything by, mixing it up. And certainly, I'm sure all of us that have had a job have probably made that mistake. Oh, but I thought you wanted me to do this, and the job that your boss is like, no, I gave you exact instructions, just do them. So probably we've all made that mistake. It's a hard life lesson, but important sometimes to just know when our professor in college or whatever gives us exact directions, just do them. Don't try to be a smart guy. Don't try to embellish it. Just do what you need to do. So I thought that was an interesting lesson there. All right, last week, we spoke a lot about the importance of negotiating and making peace and diplomacy. And this week, I'm going to actually bring examples from both the Parsha and the Haftorah of how sometimes diplomacy is a total waste of time. So what happens is Moshe is bringing the Jewish people into the land of Canaan, and he can go through a number of different other lands. So the Edomites, who are the descendants of Esav, are the first people that Moshe offers diplomacy. He says, look, we just want to cross through your land. We'll buy water from you. We'll buy groceries from you. We don't want to fight with you. We just want, passage. And of course, Edom goes out, meets him with the sword and says, if you even try coming through here, we're gonna annihilate you guys. And then again, Moshe sends messages to Sichon and Og, the so-called giants, who we'll get to a little bit later. And they're like, also, if you come here, we're going to meet you with the sword. And then in the Haftorah, which is from the book of Shoftim, of Judges, we have this very, very bizarre character by the name of Jephthah, who also attempts diplomatic solutions with the people of Ammon, I believe, and that ends up being a miserable failure as well. So to be fair, it's interesting to note that even though Moshe probably knew that diplomacy would fail, this is what Becca said to me over the Shabbos table, that still we have to try. We have to try to make peace. We have to try to come to an amicable solution. But we also have to recognize that sometimes in life, that's just not going to happen. And to try to force other people or to fruitlessly form an alliance or try a diplomatic solution, it's just not going to work. And sometimes we just have to accept that, as painful as it may be, and come to that realization. Now, of course, we try our best to make peace, but at a certain point, we realize, this is not going to work, and I've got to do what I've got to do for my family and to protect my interests. And so I thought it was important to say that. Next, we find the Jewish people complaining. Now, I know that this is something very foreign, to imagine that we Jews would complain about anything. There are complaints about the food, by the way, you know, that we saw a few parshas back about the man. Leave it to Jews to complain about a food that can taste like virtually anything that you wanted it to taste like. They were like, oh yeah, it can taste like anything, but we can't see it, you know, so it's no good. We people in general, we love to complain about everything. We have a natural proclivity to complaints. But there is something to be said for, you know, how does God react to our complaints? I have been reading this book called Say Thank You and See Miracles by Rabbi Arush. It is one of the Garden of Emunah series. It is preceded by a book called The Garden of Gratitude, which I actually was a very big fan of. This is a follow-up companion of people who, instead of just complaining, decided to be grateful for what they did have, and they saw something out of the ordinary take place, so to speak, to reward them for their gratitude. So I think that this is something that all of us have spoken about many times, and it's, you know, it's tough in life to be focused on the cup being half full as opposed to the cup being half empty. It's very challenging many times in life to look at things that way, especially when things don't go the way that we want, right? We tend to kind of complain and be like, well, why did this happen? Why did this happen? And we kind of forget all the other things that are going right and that are working in life. So what this book does is it reinforces over and over the concept of, in life, really taking stock and being grateful for what we have, and you know, not allowing the things that we don't have to be the focal points. And I think we could all use that, especially nowadays. There are so many things that we don't have. Most of us are still locked up. By the way, in Israel, the cases have skyrocketed, so we might be going back into lockdown soon. They have pushed foreign people like you guys, no offense. You're not allowed to come into the country until August 1st now, unless you have a parent or some other, you know, a reason to be here. And now we're like really worrying about whether we're going to have like a gap year at all, like this coming year. Certainly it will not take place over Zoom. So we'll see. But in any event, very important idea to think for a moment, am I complaining too much to God, to other people? If I had like a scale, this is how much I complain and this is how much I'm grateful, right? Is the scale even? Is it going too far to the complaining side? Something to be intellectually honest about, and something which directly impacts the quality of our lives and how happy we are or how unhappy we are, and certainly something that we should be aware of. I want to move now to the copper serpent story. So the people complain, and God sends these fiery serpents, and they start killing people. And then they start to pray, and Moshe is told to make a copper serpent, put it on a staff, and hold it up. And when the people look at it, they will be healed. Now, there's actually a Mishnah that refers to this directly and says that, you know, obviously the copper servant is not an intermediary to God, so on and so forth. It was just obviously something that they could temporarily focus on. Interestingly enough, I believe it was the king Hezekiah, as he is called in English, who burned the copper serpent, and the sages praised him for that. You guys will correct me if I'm wrong on that, please. But I thought that one of the fascinating ideas, first of all, obviously we always speak about this concept of the serpent. Now, I don't know if you guys were doing the Daf Yomi, but there was a couple of days ago a rather bizarre Daf Yomi, which I will not even mention because we are in mixed company. That will automatically get all the guys to look it up. It was, I believe, 110 in Shabbat. You will not believe what it says there. I still can't believe it, even though I've read it several times. But in any event, so we find that this serpent, whenever we have this imagery of the serpent, it usually brings us back, of course, to the Garden of Eden story. But how fascinating is it that, you know, the serpent is what creates the poison. And on the other front, we actually make some, you know, venom antidotes from that very poison. All the best, Max. So what's absolutely fascinating is sometimes what happens, it is exactly what hurts that ends up curing us. Now, Dr. Charles, I'm sure that you have encountered in your many years as an ER doctor some kind of poisonous bite. At least I haven't heard any snake bite stories from you. None, at least, which had you suck the poison out, but I would really enjoy one of those stories. But could you comment perhaps medically on this fascinating idea that sometimes we actually find, what poison, what caused the harm can also cure?
Well, so basically, the wonders of the immune system are many. Can everybody hear me? And basically, the immune system has sort of a mechanism by which it learns to recognize what is sort of what belongs in the body and what doesn't. And when a small amount of what doesn't is introduced, the body learns to recognize it so that basically it can get itself ready such that it can fight the pathogen once it comes in. So this is a phenomenon that we're seeing in our time right now with the coronavirus. A lot of people have expressed concern to me. Oh, well, I took the test and I didn't have antibodies. So what am I supposed to do about that? And like the truth is, in many of those cases, the person got exposed. They had a big antibody response. Their body learned how to make the antibodies. And then it's basically holding everything on standby so that if it's exposed to corona, then ultimately the body will have the correct response. Does that make sense?
Wow.
Also,
you even got a coronavirus insert, Charles. That was awesome.
Yeah, and by the way, so the most recent snake bite story, there are 3 poisonous snakes in the state of New York. We had a 73-year-old lady come in, and so she had gotten bitten by one of them. Now, and it's important to note that when somebody gets bitten by a snake, they got to know what kind of snake it was, because if it's not a poisonous snake, then it's usually not a problem. Ultimately, most snake bites in and of themselves are called dry bites. They don't actually have poison in them because the snake wants to hold its poison for the stuff it's trying to eat. It really doesn't want to use it on us. But that being said, sometimes it does. But this 73-year-old lady comes in and she's like, I got a snake bite. And I'm like, oh, wow. Do you know what bit you? And she's like, well, yeah, I have it right here. And she holds up this huge, like 6-foot-long dead snake. And like, I'm like, how did you get that? She's like, well, after it bit me, I had to beat it to death with a giant box. And so she's like, this is a very embarrassing story. And I'm like, actually, man, you're the toughest lady I've met all year. So, it turns out she was fine and the snake bite was not dangerous, but it wasn't indeed a poisonous snake. So that was my snake bite story. I hope you enjoyed it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I will inform you, Charles, that here in Israel, at least in Beit Shemesh, it is illegal for us to kill snakes. So even if we are in mortal danger, we are not allowed to kill the snakes because we could get arrested for that. So when we have snake incidents, and they have happened a couple of times, as Robert could probably tell you. So there was that one story, Robert, with Riv Duty. I don't know if you remember that, but at the end of the day, we are not allowed to mention that we have killed the snakes. We a few years ago, we had wild dogs running around the neighborhood attacking the children. And they brought in a group of people that were supposed to catch them and trap them. And then some PETA activists from Tel Aviv came in and actively blocked them. I myself was about to lead a raiding party. We were going to get dressed up in like camouflage and play like Apocalypse Now music, and go out and hunt them down. Rav Gurzy gave us even a little bit of a lesson as to the best way to disarm a wild dog, which was punching it in the nose, believe it or not. And then we found out that we could all get arrested, and we halted that idea. But, look, I'm a big fan of animals, but not when they're trying to kill me and attack my children. So, that's whatever. Okay. So in any event, thank you for that sidebar, Charles. That was excellent. So it is very interesting that even till today, the snake is still part of the universal medical symbol. And, an interesting idea is that the snake usually represents the Yetzer Hara, or the evil inclination, which is in a person. And, although most of us are kind of like, we'd rather be without this evil inclination, it is in fact the evil inclination that enables us to have the opportunity to become better. If we didn't have any evil inclination, none of us could grow, none of us could become better people, none of us would have anything to work against. And therefore, even though, rightfully so, we see it as not necessarily a great thing, nevertheless, the evil inclination is very important for us in this world and our ability to grow and become better people. So in any event, those are some of the ideas about the snake. Let's move to the end of the Parsha when we have this very bizarre showdown between the Jewish people and these two giants. So who were the giants? What were the giants? And what is it all about? So from a classical perspective, in the beginning of the Torah, we have these beings called the Nephilim. The Nephilim were some angels that basically told God, look, these humans that you created, let's just be honest, they suck and they just do everything bad. Just send us down there and we'll show them how to do it. We'll do a much better job. So God sends them down there and they wreak utter havoc and chaos in the world. You can read what happens at the end of Parshat Bereshit. And basically God has to, kind of destroy the world because of some of the things they did. Now, this has no relation to the absolutely miserable film, Noah, which I believe was with Russell Crowe. I don't know if any of you suffered through this film. It gave me great joy to review it because it was probably the worst film I've ever watched next to The Passion. Although The Passion was worth watching just so you could watch the South Park episode Mocking It, which many of you know I'm very fond of. But at the end of the day, there are these Nephilim beings in the movie Noah, which they're kind of like rock creatures. So that's not the way we look at them, but whatever. So in any event, these guys went around, they destroyed the world, and the Midrash says that Og, he hung on to the Teva, he hung on to the ark, and that's how he survived. And Sichon was actually basically one of the giants had either had an adulterous relationship or a forced relationship with one of the sons, Ham's wife, and she was pregnant with Sichon in the ark. That's what the Midrash says. So that is how Sichon and Og survive the flood. Now, my old friend Marvin Stiefel from Englewood, New Jersey, actually wrote a book called Fallen Angels, in which he collected all the different midrashim and ideas about these, quote unquote giants. I have the manuscript. I don't know if he's published it yet or not, but it's obviously a very interesting idea. Now, whether, we look at them as giants or not, how we understand that, that's a whole discussion in itself. But I would like to take a little bit of a mystical interpretation that Rav Kook gives and tie it in. So there's an idea, Zulu Matzu, everything that exists has a parallel in the world of good and in the world of bad. God willing, I'm hoping to speak about this next week, this concept of this kind of yin and yang, that there's a parallel in the forces of good and evil everywhere. So in terms of us, when we go into a place, when we go into a door, we have mezuzot. The mezuzot are a mitzvah, which basically, declares that this is a home of good, of holiness, of good things. And what is the opposite of that? So Rav Kook describes Sichon and Og as the mezuzot of the forces of evil, barring the Jewish people from entering the land of Israel. That is how he views them. And it's a pretty unique interpretation, obviously. Moshe, of course, destroys both Sichon and Og. They do not really militarily stand up to him. And the Jewish people end up getting into the land. But that was, of course, a trial of courage. I mean, one can imagine, you know, if you're going into this like Lord of the Rings, like Return of the King, or whatever the name of the third movie was. I mean, they're all mixed up now. Like one of these huge battle sequences in which you're like, dude, there's no way those guys are going to win. So basically, you know, Moshe and the Jewish people survive that, and they conquer Og and Sichon, who were literally hired by the Canaanite nations to guard the land of Israel, to stop the land of Canaan, to stop the Jews from getting in. And they are made quick work out of it. They're gone. But I thought that was a very fascinating idea from Rav Kook. I would like to now break off and speak about something different than the Parsha. I'm sorry, you know, but again, I told you that I'm going to talk about whatever I feel like. So there. And I came across two very fascinating halachot, Jewish law, when it came to the laws of tefillin that I had never seen before, and I wanted to share them with you. So I'm going to give a little background information to start off with. We know that, let's say we have a married couple, and during certain times, that married couple is not allowed to be physically intimate or touch. So basically, during the time of the menstruation, until the woman goes to the mikvah, the couple doesn't, physically touch. So I saw a question. Let's say there's a guy, and for whatever reason he's sick or he lost an arm, God forbid, and he can't put on his tefillin himself. So Rav Ovadia Yosef rules in the Yalkut Yosef that his wife may put the tefillin on him even if she is in a nida state, even if she is in a state that they normally can't touch. And I thought that was absolutely fascinating because I am not aware of I'm not aware of any cases outside of sickness, illness, nursing someone back to health, where a married couple can touch if the wife has not yet gone to the ritual bath to the mikvah. But for the mitzvah of tefillin, apparently, she is allowed to put the tefillin on him. If she is scared that she's going to physically touch him, so the Rav Ovadia says she should put on gloves and she can still put the tefillin on him. So I thought that was a very fascinating psak, one that I had not seen a parallel for. If anyone has seen a parallel, please let me know. But I thought that was very interesting. And then there was this other case. This is a wild, wild case. And I've actually seen people that have had this. We all know a number of people. So let's say there's a guy, and he's got on his arm where he puts tefillin on, he's got a tattoo of a naked woman. So is he allowed to put on tefillin there? Right? Better yet, I mean, at the end of the day, like, you're not really allowed to daven in front of anybody's nakedness, right? So, you know, he's got this like image on his arm. So what do you do in such a situation? So he brings up a number of different resolutions, one of which is to put leather on the arm and then put the tefillin on top of it. But then he posits the following, and this is again the first time I've ever seen this, that he would be allowed to tattoo lines on his arm to kind of like cover up the nakedness in the tattoo. So that was the first time that I saw the allowance of, you know, actually putting ink into oneself or putting like a tattoo on top of a tattoo if it was an indecent tattoo. Another example that's brought is, let's say a person is a convert and they had a cross on their arm or an ankh or another, you know, religious symbol. So obviously today it's probably easier to just do the tattoo removal, although it might be more expensive. I don't know if anyone has any, information on that. It is definitively ruled by most poskim that a person that got a tattoo does not have to remove that tattoo. The Torah says that a person is not allowed to get a tattoo to begin with. The act of tattooing is not permissible. However, once a person has a tattoo, there is no obligation to remove that tattoo. So this comes into play. I, of course, am always asked, those of you that have had me in BCHSJS and whatnot, I always had this quandary because people would ask, according to Judaism, are we allowed to get a tattoo? I heard, that's what they say, I heard that if you have a tattoo, you're not allowed to be buried in a Jewish cemetery. So this puts me, the guy with the rabbi card in the following quandary. If I tell them that the Torah says you're not allowed to get a tattoo, they're going to be like, okay, whatever. I don't really care what the Torah says. I'm going to get a tattoo. But if you tell a person, if you get a tattoo, you can't get buried in a Jewish cemetery, then all of a sudden they're like, dude, I don't care about what the Torah says, but I still want to be buried in a Jewish cemetery. That's a little bit too far. So I am not a fan of making things up to get people to do the right thing. I believe that may have been a rumor, and that's the way they got people not to get tattoos. But the response that I came up with was as follows. So I say to people, look, the Torah says you're not allowed to get a tattoo. Every Jewish cemetery has its own rules. It could be that Jewish cemeteries basically instituted, if you have a tattoo, we assume you're not Jewish, and we won't allow you to be buried here. So I would advise you to call the cemetery that you plan on being buried at and asking them what their policy is, and then, you can go from there. Obviously, no one has taken me up on this. I don't know anyone that actually, called the cemetery and made arrangements way ahead of time or whatever. So that's how I got out of that. I'm not sure whether, what happened in the end, but that is one of the big questions. So I thought that was a very fascinating, very, very fascinating halacha. For today's book review, Charles, I just finished this. I know that I sent you a copy. I'm going to review A Life Worth Living. Did you read it yet, Charles? A Life Worth Living?
Yeah, I'm about 2/3, 3/4 of the way done. It's in the living room.
So this is A Life Worth Living by Rabbi Shraga Friedman. It's stories and ideas for constant Kiddush Hashem. It talks about the importance as Jews to do the right thing and be a mensch, something that I don't really need to tell anyone on this conference call because I know you all personally, I know you all do that, but it's always good to have reinforcement. He divides it into many different scenarios ranging from, how to deal with non-Jewish neighbors. At the end of the book, there's a whole section on dealing with the police department, which may or may not be as much relevant today as it was when the book was published. Excellent. Yes, I, of course, do not want to talk about whatever's going on in America and defunding the police and so on and so forth. But there was one particular chapter that's centered around Rabbi Pesach Krohn and talked about how to properly act on an airplane. Now, this is irrelevant to most of you because you're not flying anywhere, probably for a long time. Mitch, if you want to short something, dude, the airlines. But no, I'm not giving that as investment advice. I'm just tormenting you. But so in it, there's a beautiful story by Rabbi Krohn, which is very well known, but I'm just going to repeat it. So Rabbi Krohn was about to board an airplane. He was by the gate, and there were these two huge security guards that were walking around and seemingly looking for someone. And they finally see him, and they call him. They say, "Oh, Rabbi, can you please step this way? Can you come here?" And he got a little nervous, whatever. And then they brought him to the side, and they said, "Rabbi, is this your cell phone?" And he said, "Oh, wow, yeah, that's my cell phone. I must have forgotten it when I checked in." He said, "But how do you gentlemen? How do you know it's me? How do you possibly remember? There's thousands of people that go through these checkpoints, that goes through everything." Bye-bye, Robert. Thank you so much. There's so many people that go through this checkpoint. How could you possibly remember that it was me? So the two security guards said, there are thousands of people that go through this, but there was only one man that spent a minute thanking us for protecting us and keeping us safe and treating us with respect and dignity. And that's how we remembered exactly who it was that left their phone. And what a Kiddush Hashem that Rabbi Krohn says, how important it is, whenever we go anywhere, whether it's, we're in a hospital and you say hello to the security guard, you're in a store, you're in a toll booth, whatever. To have derech eretz, to know this is a human being, this is a person, to treat them with respect, to speak to them with respect, and to show that you care about them with a few kind words that doesn't cost anyone. Such an important lesson. So I very much enjoyed this book, and I would advise you guys to look into it if you are interested in said topics. All right, that is what I have to say today. I will open up to random questions and answers now, if anyone has some. I did enjoy the market crash on Friday. I hope it continues to crash, no offense, but it makes no sense that there's 45 million people who are unemployed and the stock market breaks new highs every day. It just shows how utterly absurd and disconnected the different segments of America are. That's as close to politics as I'm getting. Okay, questions, statements, insults, whatever you guys would like to say. Oh, come on, Bueller. I will share that my wife and I are watching the show called The Community. And we're enjoying it. There's some amusing moments to it. Yeah, okay. Nobody has any question? I mean, come on, make me feel good. Like, just ask a question about something, you know, like, surely I said something ridiculous in the last 45 minutes that someone will have a question or a comment, or like, you know, what kind of drugs were you on when you're thinking about that? Something. Nothing. Wow. You know, I at least expect one person to save me here, guys. You know, I'm drowning.
All right.
Charles, I'm just going to show you my cute children, and you're going to forget about the whole thing.
Yeah, well, Yaakov Ezra asked me a question yesterday. I didn't know how to answer. Right, that's okay. He said ask a question.
So what was the unifying idea between the two tefillin stories? The wife being able to help and being able to tattoo.
It was just two halachas he was saying.
Yeah, but what was like the unifying idea?
Julie's asking if there's a message or a unifying idea between the tefillin story and the wife helping the husband, the tattoo story and the tefillin halacha.
To be honest, they just were 2 pages apart from each other in the laws of tefillin. I probably, you know, maybe we could think of a connection between the two.
Is that like the whole tefillin or something?
No, he was just quoting a halacha.
Yeah, it was just something at the end that you know, like when I learn different things throughout the week, if I see something I'd never seen before, I like jot it down and I'd wanted to share with you. So it really in no way was connected to the shir. I probably should have thought of some way to connect it to the shir. That's what the Ben Ish Chai would do. I'm open to anyone, you know, connecting them now.
Yaakov Ezra asked me, is it going to be less of a mitzvah to save somebody's life in the times of Mashiach because everyone's going to get revived anyway?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So actually I have this idea, and I'm sure you know this, Charles, that even to save a person who is going to die for sure, even to give them a few more minutes is worthwhile, because who knows what that person could accomplish in just a couple of minutes, or how they could affect somebody else's life. So every moment of life is important and has the opportunity to affect and influence people.
Wow.
I happen to know there's someone, a family friend, who's been in the hospital for a month. They've been in and out of comas, so on and so forth. At one point, we were like, there's no chance that this person's going to make it. And now it looks like, God willing, they're going to be transferred to another facility. So in answer to your question, Yaakov Ezra, I would say that, yes, it is a mitzvah even to save a person's life for a few moments. And I want to include quality of life, you know, to make a person happy just for a moment, you know, even if they're very sad, you know, just to improve the quality of another person's existence for a few seconds is definitely worthwhile. I have the great merit of learning with Rav Machlis, who I hope to bring onto the call one of these days. And he is a very righteous individual, a person who just radiates kindness and being positive. And, you know, he would go as far as to say, you know, just to bring a smile to a person's face for a few seconds, it's worth it to like travel like across the country. I will let you know that this is a bonus. Ora and I are reading this book called For Goodness Sake, Inspirational Stories of Chesed by Rabbi Baruch Brul. And Mitch, you'll really appreciate this. One of the first stories in the book was called, and you will really laugh when you see this, because you'll be like, oh, here's Rabbi Eli being crazy again with this ridiculous stuff. So there's a story in this book that's about snuff tobacco, okay? And it basically talks about how there was this big rabbi, and he didn't really like snuff, but there was an older fellow in the community that went around giving everybody snuff. And so this rabbi used to take the snuff just because he saw how happy the other guy was. Here it is. It's a story called Give and Take. Right there, you can see the word snuff several times. This, of course, will lead me further into making my Kuntris Shmek Tabak, which will be a short pamphlet about the various legalities and halachot about snuff tobacco, which I've seen at least 20 halachot about. I'm not quite sure who would read said book, but I'm amused to perhaps put it together. And I even thought that I would call the snuff companies and have them put an advertisement on the back and sponsor the whole project. So that is, I saved the amusing comments for the end of this year as opposed to the beginning of this year this time. So there.
I have one question. You mentioned, I think, next week that
Melanie,
you're
allowed to ask like
100
questions if you want.
Well, it's just like a clarifying question. So you mentioned, I think, something this is called Zulu, that everything has a parallel of good and evil. And I was wondering, did I get that right? Like, is there a full name of what that is? Kind of curious about that.
So yeah. So there, it's a pasuk. It's a verse, I believe, in the book of Mishlei, of Proverbs, or Ecclesiastes, Kohelet. It's said by King Solomon that everything that God created is zu leumat zu, this parallel to this. So we interpret this in a few different ways. One can interpret it that everything in the spiritual world has a parallel in the physical world, right? Everything that we see in the physical world has its, you know, spiritual parallel, like a body and a soul. But the alternative explanation is that everything that exists in the realm of evil has a parallel in the realm of good and vice versa. So for example, next week, we're going to talk about Parshat Balak. And in this Parsha, there's this evil sorcerer called Bilam that wants to curse the Jewish people. And he has great power. And I'm not going to say great responsibility. He just has great power. And he has a certain degree of prophecy, which is, you know, listed and read in the Torah. So he is seen as the parallel for Moses in the realm of evil, right? So my Rebbe Betzalel Naor writes in his introduction to Orot, he kind of sees the secular philosopher Nietzsche in one corner, and Rav Kook, you know, one of the great sages, in the other corner. So for next week, Melanie, I'm actually going to try to put together a whole course, the whole class to explain this idea and find different parallels throughout Judaism of this kind of yin-yang, you know, evil and good, and how they parallel each other.
Well, sounds interesting.
I hope so. Well, we'll see at the end if my board
Next week. To be continued.
It will be on film, so even if you don't see it, Melanie, even if you're not live, you know, you can watch it. Excellent question.
Can we also talk about Viktor Frankl and his whole perspective?
Well, Viktor Frankl is, I don't know if you saw, there was a whole thing about the Rebbe and Viktor Frankl. I had posted it on Facebook quite some time ago. I actually have several copies of Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning right near my desk, because I'm a very big fan of that. Dan, all the best, man. Call me sometime. I'd love to chat, dude.
For sure.
Okay, take care. So in terms of what? In terms of what's going on right now in our lives and the power that we have in our minds to overcome, you know, this adversity, or in general, what do you mean in particular, Biana?
Oh, I mean, it just sounded that it was related to your plan for next week. I don't know.
Oh, well, I can try to wing it in. I hadn't thought about it, but I certainly can consider it. He's a very profound thinker, you know. It's just his personal story is amazing, let alone, you know, what he writes in this book, which is very empowering. I bought a copy for pretty much each yeshiva that I teach in, because I think it's really important. There's a bit of a debate over what happened. There's some people that say that he converted to Christianity. There are other people that say that he put on tefillin.
Really?
So I don't really know historically what happened to him.
That's
But certainly his, what is it called, logotherapy? Certainly his methodology and his ideas are very cogent, and, you know, there's something to be said for it. So I will see if I can wing it in there. Nice.
I actually do have a question. It's completely unrelated and it doesn't apply for quite some time. But I was wondering, like, if coronavirus is still around for Rosh Hashanah, what happens if you can't go to shul to listen to shofar?
Well, you're going to have it more easy than us men, in that you can just, you know, you can get away without hearing shofar.
Okay.
The men will have to blow for themselves or have an outside minyan, you know, with 2-meter restrictions and all that stuff. Blowing the shofar through the mask will probably be interesting. It will be made easier by the fact that apparently this year, the first night of Rosh Hashanah falls out on Friday night. So it will only be of concern for Sunday, for one day, the second day of Rosh Hashanah.
Okay.
Biana, I'm sure there's going to be many writings. If God forbid that's where we're at by Rosh Hashanah time, we will re-examine that issue, and Rev Herschel Schafter and many other people will have some guidance for us.
Well, God willing, hopefully we'll be back to normal by then.
Yes. Well, my mom is back in Englewood, by the way. She's there with the Vrummy. So we originally, what the plan for this summer is, we were supposed to be back for the summer, and I was gonna take all the books in my parents' house, and we were gonna have like a huge like book giveaway, and have like everybody come over and take books and whatever. But you know, obviously that's not happening. So, alas. Aaron was like, dude, I would have come in from Houston just for that. You know, free books, definitely worth the...
Definitely. Although my wife complained that we don't have any more room for books in the house. I said, that's easy. We'll just... Texas, everything's bigger.
No. Fortunately, my wife is a fellow book addict. Although I did say the Koren edition of the Talmud is on sale right now for $1,800, and you get the large edition plus free PDF of the entire thing. And Beck and I were shortly discussing buying it. We were like, well, where are we going to put it? And then the conversation stalled, but
that was the same conversation we had Shabbat. I was talking to somebody about buying Shas, and the response was the same thing. Where are we going to put it? And I'm like, build some bookshelves.
Yeah. Well, you have to have space for the bookshelves. You know, we
do.
We have nice. All right, so then you're just going to have to negotiate it, Aaron. That's just that simple.
This is the disease of being your student.
Yes. Well, We'll see what happens after 120 for all of us, whether that was a good move to buy that many books or not. I happen to think it is, but, you know, we will all be informed after that time. All right, guys. So I wish everyone a wonderful, wonderful week. Hopefully next Sunday we will reconvene. Next Sunday happens to be Albert Nagar's wife's Azkara. It is the 13th of Tammuz, so hopefully we'll dedicate the shir in her memory. Yeah, we wish her refuah shalema to whoever is not well. And any suggestions or requests or anything, just, you know, message them to me. I'm very happy to take requests. And as always, if anyone wants to chat, just let me know, and I would love to be in touch.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Have a great week. Thank you.
Great. Melanie, so good to see you. Aaron, so good to see you. Mamon, we'll speak later in the week. It's not the same, Aaron, when you talk to someone as when you see them. It makes a big difference,
Yeah.
man.
I decided, my daughter was all over the place, so I
He was so
decided
cute,
for
dude.
the
That was
most part
great.
to be off of it. But then she kept saying,
Very
why can't they see me?
Dude, honestly, like seeing all these kids just like made my day. So it was great.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Tony's sleeping, otherwise he'd be also crawling all over the place.
All right. Well, we'll plan it for next week then.
All right.
All the best. Mitch, take care. Charles, all the best. Bianna, be well. Thanks
you so
again.
much.
Really, it's so great to see you guys. I really appreciate it.
All right. We'll see you soon.
Take care, Rabbi.
Bye.
All right. Shavua Tov. Everyone should be blessed with good things. Be well.
I mean.
Signing out.